more that you can lean into your own personal discomfort, say what needs to be said in a non-offensive way, the more you make the world a better place.
All right. Welcome, socials. Jumpstart is doing a live with my good friend and colleague, my brother from another mother, Max Bevilacqua. We're coming to you on the company Facebook page, my personal Facebook page, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. Welcome, Max Bevilacqua from Mindful Negotiating. It's such a delight to have you on this live.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm pretty pumped up by that video.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy with it. And Tony Blauer and I are working on a new intro for our podcast, De-Escalation Station. And hopefully it'll have the same kind of dramatic, get your attention impact. One of the reasons I have the countdown in the beginning is so that there's no starting like 5 seconds after it really started and you miss the first few words. So that seems to have worked out. So to our audience, allow me to just give you a primer on why we're here. In the short period of time over the last year, I've come to know Max. He has unintentionally taught me so many things about our work. And I remember I'll tell this story because it's a funny story, Max. You know, like any professional, I have my own, sense of persona and ego. And, you and I are meeting for the first time and you bring up the prisoner's dilemma. And I'm looking really intently at you, prisoner's dilemma. And I have no effing idea what the prisoner's dilemma is. And I've been in this game for a while. And I remember coming to you afterward and admitting, I got to be honest with you, I don't know what the prisoner's dilemma is. Can you tell me? And then I felt like you opened up a whole, concept for me to learn more about, and it made me feel very validated, the concept in our approach. So I loved it. And we recently in our conversations had another topic that you taught me about, and the title of our broadcast today, Non-Complementary Negotiation, not what you'd expect. That is from Max. That title is from Max. And
yes, can I yes and you? Yes.
And when you told me what it was, I said, "Oh my God, we have to talk about this because I don't think it's talked about enough." I love the way you reframed it. So, Max, by all means, give a little bit of a primer about your work at Mindful Negotiating, and then let's just dive right into what non-complementary negotiation is.
Sure. I'll do my best. First, thank you for having me on. And it's nice. I think it's a good measure of negotiation people if they can have mutual admiration, because we can all learn from each other.
I don't learn anything from Melissa Fortunato. I just want to say that live. There's nothing to learn from Melissa.
I don't even know if she's a real FBI agent.
Hi, Melissa. We love you. Yeah.
And Melissa's another person that I'd lump in here, but having met you, Andy, I just feel like the thing you said at the end of the video, something like, the more we can engage in this place of discomfort, the more we can make the world a better place. I believe that. I believe that. And I believe that insofar as we know we can start an interaction really poorly. Am I allowed to swear in this?
I'm careful when we go live on all platforms. I mean, I can't get Tony Blauer to stop. But,
okay,
but for us, we have
more
nice mustaches. We're connected to academia in some way.
That's right. Let's give mustaches a better name.
All right.
We are involved in many missions. One is to make facial hair look trusting.
Yes.
Another is, you're doing the work that I think I have different language for, but it's exactly what I'm talking about. So I appreciate that your appreciation is hopefully a way of talking about what you're already doing and have been doing in your career. So I think we need more of that kind of crosstalk and cross-pollination. So I'm coming at it from an international relations interest. I went to grad school for international relations. I studied religious studies, blah, blah, blah. I grew up in an interfaith household, was really curious about how to talk across worldviews and extremism. And what do you do in the face of extremism? could you talk someone down, right? And so it was very natural after I went through like the program on negotiation, which is like a Harvard, Tufts, MIT consortium. I was really intent to reach out to people like you and Melissa, and Curtis Minder's another one, of like, well, who actually does this? Because I have all this academia and some experience, but I was like, let's actually see what is useful and what we can discard. And so I think we're pressure testing tools. And one way I think about it, so our organization is called Mindful Negotiating, and the idea based on Ellen Langer's work on mindlessness, that most of our behavior is mindless, automatic. And Andy, we can get more into like the neuroscience, which I think you know a bit more about in terms of like mirror neurons. But so many of the tasks we do, we're not really analyzing the current context. We're somewhere else, or we've pre-committed in some ways, or based on our family crucible, which forms our conflict styles, we have a habituated response. And so basically we're negotiating on autopilot or mindlessly. I think it would be really cool if we could do it mindfully. I don't proclaim to always do it mindfully. And in fact, even asking, can I curse or not, was like an evolution in my own mindfulness.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're people that are trying to say, yeah, we have some stuff that we think is helpful and we're still on the path. And so in some ways I think we share a disposition of like skepticism towards expertise. Expert of what? Which context? Like walking around in whose body? Like with what skin tone, with what gender? Like all these different presentation differences. Like the physicality, like we talked about non-complementary behavior. Well, let me define non-complementary first before we get to that. I mean,
please do that.
Stature plays a role for sure, right? Like, so non-complementary behavior or negotiation, to my mind, is something that I've only really attempted once. I was walking home slightly inebriated from a bar in New York City. Two taxi drivers had gotten a minor fender bender. I heard them fighting. They'd gotten out of their cabs. They're close to blows, like fingers in each other's faces, not yet grabbing the shirt, but like they have an audience. No one's doing shit. No one's doing anything. They're adding to the audience cost. Sorry about that. And I was like, look, I have some liquid courage. Let's try this out. Like if I think non-complementary behavior, which I don't know where I first heard about it. I tried to look it up, but the concept you'll see is just like reacting to a situation in a way that rewrites the outcome. It's not the expected ending. So when two dudes especially have an audience and are like, physically, not just metaphorically butting egos, it's not going to end well. Like there's no way to save face. There has to be a way to save face. So I was like, okay. So I kind of stumbled up to them and said like, where I can get like I said like, good evening, gentlemen, or something like that. Something just bizarre. And I was like, do you know where I could like procure a bacon, egg, and cheese at this hour? And there was a deli right behind them. So it was like a really, really dumb question. In addition to it being strange. And I pretended that I didn't know what they were doing, right? I addressed them as if they were not doing what they were doing and enrolled them as like neighborhood help. Can you help this like drunk guy just like get a good nosh? And they kind of, they were kind of shocked and like, I guess you could go fucking over there, man. And I don't know what happened that far after, but it changed the scene a little bit.
Of that I have no doubt. And so, what you're targeting here in the discussion, I know what they might be. What are some other terms to describe? Because what you're saying is that what you did in that moment was not complementary to what was happening with those people. It was not complementary. So what would be some other words to describe the non-complementary attributes of what you did?
I would say mindful, because it means you're in the present, like you're in the scene. You're not looking at like how the scene usually goes. You are participating as an active self-author, co-author of the situation. So you're like exerting yourself in reality. That to me is being present, being mindful. I would also say it's surprise or ingenuity.
Yes. Which are outcomes of deliberate distraction. Those are outcomes. So, Tony Blauer is very fond of the distraction approach in the de-escalation context. And in the psychomotor world, if you're engaging in physical conflict, that might be what Bruce Lee would call a feint, or to fake. Yeah. So you're doing a fake while leading someone somewhere else.
Yes.
And like I could totally, because I love bacon, egg, and cheese sandwiches. Like if I were in it with another dude and someone came over and said, hey, you know where I could get a good bacon, egg, and cheese? I might laugh because that would resonate with me. Like, oh, I love bacon, egg, and cheeses.
Yeah.
And in the environments that I worked in, here's a funny spin on that. You would be de-escalating somebody, and it could be at the height of violence, or you could be trying to intervene with two people who were in serious conflict, and another person served or patient would just kind of walk up to you because this is their norm. They see this every 10 minutes. So if they're not directly in it, they don't feel fear. They walk up and they're like, can you unlock the closet for me to get a sweatshirt? And I'm like, dude, I'm dealing with something high risk over here. Are you not paying attention? Like, and so what he's doing is not complementary to what I'm trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think this is something we could talk about. I don't know how to inject mindfulness into a scenario that's highly escalated to the degree like you're talking about people with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, having psychiatric emergencies, or being on substances.
Right.
I think that's something that we agree on, and why one of the many reasons we get along is because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but behavior is like a matter of degree and not kind. Like the person who is like about to stab someone abusing heroin and really on the, like, that could be anyone, right? Given certain circumstances, or rather you're not that different. And like, I just know I'm someone who I lucked out in a lot of ways, like the accident of my birth. And so once you have that realization, it also changes, how would you want someone to deal with you if you were on your worst day? Like if you were not okay, how, like, the person who could be of help is either like an angel or a demon to you. Like either they're a path back to life or they're not. So anyway, I think what you do is super cool. And even like terms like deliberate distraction are not terms that I have in my vocabulary, but I would say deliberate distraction with an intent would be a non-complementary move.
Yeah. And the core attribute of like activating surprise circuitry. And I'm going to stimulate surprise circuitry to disrupt the limbic system's targeting of this other human being.
Yep. And I don't know if you can do it at scale, which is something I used to think about. Like, could you drop a concert into Gaza? Like I don't think you could necessarily, but like at scale, could you do something of beauty? So that's another conversation.
That's a fascinating question. I mean, I would never have even, like, Max, you're so smart. I would not have been able to conceptualize that.
I like him. See why I love this guy?
Yeah. Like, imagine, like, just like send Audio Slave over there. Like when they went to Cuba, they totally upended that country. And for 3-4 days, there's a wonderful documentary on it.
Cool.
And, there are some musicians who would contend that, music is going to save the world. So what a great thought. Like, drop a concert in there.
It reframes bravery. Like, to go into a conflict zone with a gun, yes, requires dealing with a lot of fear, but to go in there with nothing, like
with a guitar.
Yeah. And hell yeah, dude. And I think what we're contending with is like our idea of a prisoner's dilemma is very different. I'm seeing a comment, which is very interesting. Be curious to talk about that.
Max, it might be good just for the benefit of our viewers. It's not quite the same. How about this? I'm going to try a very abbreviated description of the prisoner's dilemma. You fill out what I miss.
I'll try.
I remember when you first told it to me not knowing what it is. And then when you opened it up, I went, okay.
You knew the phenomenon.
So at its core, two people collaborating routinely leads to more equitable, positive outcome than one person might benefit if they regulate that the positive outcome only comes to them. That it's in the sharing that more potential for positive outcome is reached. Please That's that's the core end state. And
Yeah.
your description of the event of the concept is better than mine. So please round that out.
The original story, so it's like A Prisoner's Dilemma, classic game. There's some classic games that encapsulate basic scenarios that we're in. And The Prisoner's Dilemma, the story is something like they're two bank robbers. They're caught. They're in separate cells, so they can't communicate with each other. And they can either not rat on each other or cooperate, or they could rat on each other, defect. And those are generally our choices in life. We could cooperate, but our fear of how bad it would be if they defected while we cooperated is so painful if we don't have that trust that we can't realize the better outcome, right?
Yeah.
Like it would be better if we both cooperated. Like here's a low cost example. Let's say there are two dudes at a bar and they're both mentally unwell. It would be good for them to talk about therapy, or I don't know. I don't want to like get into like a conversation about like what's healthy and unhealthy behavior, but it'd be good for you to disclose, right? To like risk being called like, oh, you're weak, you're in therapy, whatever. It would be a better outcome for both people to know that they weren't alone, right? So generally speaking, it would be better, but because the cost is high to do something in public that could be seen as vulnerable, we don't. And so what we often do defensively is defect, and the other person is like, what the heck? You defected. And we're like, yeah, well, you defected.
And you left me vulnerable, right?
And I defected just because I was just being defensive. I wasn't trying to F you over, but I think you were, because I don't trust anyway. So the idea is there's also the negotiator's dilemma, which is we could both share information that would enable us to get to an elegant outcome, but we might not share that information for fear that if I share, you'll take advantage of it. And we're already falling into kind of this mindlessness of binary thinking of either I disclose or I don't. You could do something in the middle, right? You could share one thing that you don't mind sharing and test for reciprocity, right?
Yeah.
So we're, the mindful way would be to find that third option, that third way. I don't want to be soft or hard. I don't want to be empathetic or assertive. I want to be both, right? Like I want to do both things.
Yeah. Yes. Two things that don't serve each other can both be true. They can non-complementary. They can both be true. I can genuinely be upset at another human being, and I can genuinely really be distracted by a good bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich.
Yeah.
Non-complementary.
I'm wondering aloud, I definitely didn't have this foresight in the moment, but I even wonder if like the part of the brain and body that is interested in violence or is like transitions to food well or other like physicality. I don't know if that.
I'll share something with you. And this is slightly drawn out in the timeline than immediate, but it was immediate enough. There was a guy that we were tasked to support in real time. We were known as the behavior contact team. Our whole job was one guy, and he had been in seclusion or restraint almost uninterrupted for like 18 months. And finally, the Centers for Medicaid came along and said, look, if you don't get this guy out, you're going to have an imminent jeopardy finding. That means that you're violating the conditions of participation. You're getting claim money for us, and you're keeping the guy secluded or in some kind of mechanical restraint all the time. That's not what we do at Medicare, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare. We don't give money for providers to do that. You have to find something different. So they built a team of us that I led around this one person. It was very dangerous and very violent. And this was the intervention, Max, because he had hurt like 80 people and put them on what most people would refer to as workman's compensation. He was the protectee of our team, where we had three jobs. We had to protect other people from him hitting them. We had to protect him from other people wanting reprisal, and we had to protect ourselves from his potential violence on us. It was an extraordinary detail.
Explosive. Yeah.
This started with, if you're safe for 2 hours and keep your hands to yourself, you get coffee. You do that for this period of time, you get a pizza.
Yeah.
So there is something to what you've said are other needs met by these physical experiences of consumption, food, and
I think they're proxies for love, I think, which is like, along with us talking about guitars instead of guitars instead of guns. The issue is like, we know what is effective culturally. We're up against it. Right. Like, so sometimes.
Hold on a minute, Max. Hold on. You can't fly over the brilliance of what you just said. Those things we were doing were proxies for love. Yeah. I would just hearing that. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
They were proxies. They were clinical proxies for love.
Yeah. We eat.
And no, they weren't the most heart healthy. And it would enrage people it would enrage other people served and staff. You're taking the most violent person here and you're giving him coffee just so he don't hit anybody. We got to start somewhere, but I'll tell you what, we're not giving him coffee so he doesn't. He has to produce, I didn't, and then get the coffee. He has to produce that first.
Yeah.
What was your answer? Violating the guy's rights for 18 months and making shit worse? So now I got to deal with him when he comes out of there predisposed to be violent because he's constantly secluded or restrained, and now you're pissed off that he's safe for 2 hours and I'm giving him a cup of instant? You got to be kidding me. It's
low value, but it doesn't appear, it's not complementary, right? And so I think that's the other idea, is that maybe it's also the opposite thing, which is I'm actually giving you some trust. Like, you could throw this coffee on me. And, I think that's trust building. And I have no business talking about corrections, but do teach negotiation inside facilities.
Yes, you do. Yeah. And don't sell yourself short on that. The work you're doing in corrections with people served and hopefully with staff is no small thing. So,
I hope not, but it's also, it's the highest stakes, right? It relates to harm. And so there's a tough inclination, which is like, how do you experiment safely? And I think we talked about, there's this short story called The Dork Police, but I think his name is Michael Gardner.
You sent it to me. I read it. It was super smart. Tell our audience about that, because I think it's brilliant.
Cincinnati PD was just thinking creatively and was like, hey, any domestic violence calls y'all are getting, I'll take them. And people were like, great, take them. Don't want them. These could easily escalate. And we can talk about why audience calls and all that kind of stuff. But the introduction of the officers themselves might have been escalating. And so he was like, let's just try some stuff. Like, right when we go in, let's sit down and watch TV. And they'll be like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, hey, well, I figure you're not going to listen to us anyway, so we're just going to watch TV until you're ready. Like, something strange. Or showing up with their shirts or hats on backwards. Like, just doofy, funny things, which to me are the most beautiful moments of what I'd call mindful negotiating, but just beauty when someone is being non-complimentary. And I think humor is the ultimate non-complimentary thing, but it's high risk, right? And so
it is high risk because you don't know how it's going to land all the time,
right?
It's a judgment. Max, when you work with attorneys or business people, because that's like the people of that your pedigree has groomed you to be of value to. Well, it's true. Like, how do you address how do you describe how you discuss non-complementary negotiation in those settings?
I would probably take a family systems approach. So family, is the root of familiar. When something is familiar to us, it is
familiar.
Exactly. So I think we're negotiating in a way that's familiar, right? Literally, the scripts that we have that are embedded are within our family. And roughly, we enroll other people in the roles of family. And even linguistically, and again, I'm no expert here, but linguistically, so I spent some time in Indonesia, and you generally sense that there's mother, there's father, there's uncle and aunt, which is they're not your parent, but they are an adult that is safe, we think, but you respect. There's cousin. There are ways of talking about people that are limited, and we slot people in. Or one theory is an attachment theory wise, based on our relationship with our primary caregiver between 0 and 6 months, maybe more than that, we form an attachment style. And so we do things and we enroll people as, bosses as parents, colleagues as siblings, these types of things. And I'm still learning more about it, but I take a family systems approach and say, hey, I know you thought you were an individual and you would do a lot of beautiful individual things, but sorry, you were born of someone, and you were forged in a family crucible, and you are a fragment of a system. And you are now plugged into new systems at your place of work. And your idea that you are totally separate in your communication style or behavior, while you may accentuate some things or mask other things, they're directly related. And so, like, that, like, because you're doing it so close to someone's like life, that I think it's more evident that there are daily negotiations, whether it's, getting a kid to stop playing video games or whatever, it's more identifiable. So a lot of what we're saying is you could have more influence over your outcomes. And that requires that you understand where you are in a conversation, in a negotiation. Yes. And for me, that's visual and like kind of tangible. Like I need to see a map. And I use the 7 elements, sure, classic PON thing. But the other thing, I think the other reason we get along, which is like, look, we both are jamming out to the same kind of music and we talk about it in different ways. And we play it on different instruments and we are different people, different bodies. So the big thing that like we try and say, however hippie-ish, but I do say this in front of lawyers and execs, is if the musician plays an instrument, the negotiator plays themselves. And if you are not aware of what you can and can't do or how you show up, right? And this is why we also videotape people, because it's cringy, it's terrible. But we avoid routinely how we show up because we've been interested in avoiding shame or seeing ourselves as we don't want to be seen. Shame being, I would say, the opposite of love. So,
it's so brilliant to hear you describe it this way. And I would say that this is so important because negotiation, de-escalation skills are often trained and drilled as self-contained skills that have nothing to do with you. In other words, you can be whoever you are independent of the skill. And that's not true. In other words, you are going to come through the skill. That's the point. And if you're disingenuous, if you're irritable, if you're triggered, you have to fix that right now first so that these skills will have value, because they cannot just be recited or exercised independent of you and your emotional state in the moment. And we make a mistake because de-escalation, I've heard this in a law enforcement context, it made a lot of sense. That is an outcome. That's not de-escalation isn't a skill. There are skills of de-escalation.
Right. Attunement.
De-escalation is not a skill. De-escalation is an agreement. It's a state.
Yeah.
An outcome. It's not how you get there.
Yeah.
Like, be empathetic. What the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
And
it's also not specific. A few things. So here's a metaphor for your edits based on what I think you're saying, which is that, like, more specifically, we could say, like, we could take the trumpet, which is you could know which note to play and to actually hit it, and the breath that it requires and whatever the skill that it requires, you may not be able to hit it, which is why people really love to have, like, can you give me the line to say? Because I'm so uncertain. I don't really know what to say. Just give me some options. Yeah, that works to an extent to have some place to start, but it can be said in a way that's hollow. And so I was a teaching assistant in Harvard Law School. I wasn't a lawyer. I went to the Fletcher School at Tufts for law and diplomacy, but they let me be a teaching assistant in Harvard Law School. And a popular way of active listening was, correct me if I'm wrong, blah, 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 like showing that you're correctable, blah, blah.
Right, right.
But I remember this kid in the class who was like the A+ student, rubbed everyone the wrong way, like super intelligent, but kind of like, I'm not sure you're getting that negotiation isn't a game of who's right. It's a game of who's effective. And the way that he was saying, correct me if I'm wrong, when we were doing like a difficult tactics role play was, okay, correct me if I'm wrong. And it was just like, and I was like, this is just such a beautiful example of someone who knows the note, but who we can see it, but isn't actually playing it, right? Like, isn't actually playing it. And like, we know that tone is a lot more persuasive from studies than the actual content. Like tone, almost I'd say more than anything, and maybe body language as well. But tone is communicating. It's a totally different instrument, right? Like it's a different track in the conversation.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking, God, I love what happens to me every single time we talk. Like, so as you're describing the words, can you just give me a line? When my wife and I do this, she needs help with something. She will either criticize or request my use of words. Andy, I don't use words like you. Like I don't have the words. Can you just give me the words? And my answer is always, the words got nothing to do with it. It's not the words. It's what I see at the end state, that the words serve as a vehicle to get there. If I just give you the words, you're not going to be able to organize these things. Just because you say the same line I do doesn't mean it's going to land different. I'm in the word.
And
then I have to, then I'm dismissed, you know?
Yeah. I don't know if I put this properly in the chat, but this is just a study called Surgeon's Tone of Voice, A Clue to Malpractice History, where this is what hit it home for me, which was like, basically audiologists took samples from a few seconds at the beginning and end of routine visits to surgeons, and they could tell with over 90% accuracy the likelihood of that patient suing that surgeon or not, without content, just from tone. How dominant, hostile, condescending, anxious, whatever.
I'm going to do something musically right now. I'm feeling inspired to do this. I'm going to demonstrate
octaves.
No, I'm going to demonstrate the same 5 notes in the same sequence played differently. Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Now I'm going to play it differently. Like one swings, one is just the words.
Cadence and syncopation, in addition to tone, it really is a musical thing. I'm not just saying it to be cute.
Yes.
It is the most analogous thing in terms of performance. And I think, and I'd like for you to talk to me about this, I feel like common knowledge is to try and meet someone at their level of energy or volume. Would you agree with that? That starting note should be a mirrored note? Because this is also the opposite of non-complementary.
Okay, I'll share. I'll answer it with a consolidated approach.
Yeah.
Most of the time, if someone is animated and angry, I'm going to project self-regulation and calm in the presence of their anger, using a lot of validation to let them know that the effort in which they are investing to be heard is working, and they don't need to continue at that level of intensity. It naturally predisposes them to wind it down. If someone is super focused and animated and targeting and may not be responsive to the self-regulated calm approach, I have turned up the volume to get their attention, which might be non-complementary, and then reel them in by leveraging mirror neurons to witnessing me re-regulate from intensity or volume. And that would be during a very acute emergency where there's very little discretionary time. I have to prevent this person from caving this other person's head in.
Yeah.
So I may be like, whoa, 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 and then redirect, try to reduce stimulation, whatever. But that's the best way for me to address that invitation.
Cool. But that starting note is huge. And there's a guy I really like at the Kennedy School, Brian Mandel, who talks about the first 180 seconds of a negotiation being some of the most formative. And
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Yep. if you don't establish that you're not a risk or a threat to the person, quickly, if you don't get that out of the way quick,
and
that question's going to be there.
If you go back to the prisoner's dilemma, basically what we're saying is in your first moves, your first 2 moves or signals, try cooperating. Because if you send a defect early on, whatever that equivalent is, so like, being threatening appears as defect versus open hands, gesture right, cooperate. You have to start with the possibility that it could end well before you do something to mitigate loss of life.
Max, tell people what you mean by defect.
Yeah. The opposite of cooperate. So if we reduce behavior into, I could either do something that is good, like as I approach you, like let's just say we're walking by each other. Cooperate would be like opening my arms to give you a hug, right? Something that sends a signal of I'm trying to cooperate with you in some way. Defect would be like I'm like pulling back a fist to punch you.
Okay, so
it would be the opposite.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So to defect is not non-complementary.
I think that's philosophical because
it is philosophical because it's not complementary to the situation. Yes, but our use of this term is that the design of the non-complementary technique is in the service of a collaborative goal.
Yes.
It's not just a moniker for anything that doesn't fit.
Right. I think, there are probably different levels of like appropriateness and maybe there's a more refined word or accurate word than non-complementary, but you could look, if someone expects you to cooperate, or let's say that there's, let's say two students are fighting in a school and the guidance counselor who has a reputation for like being like very soft-spoken and is kind of made fun of and not taken seriously, yells at them, right? Or does something out of character that could reset the situation. And that would be a defection because they're not sending the signal of like, hey guys, let's cooperate, but more setting like a different signal. So I think you could definitely like our behavior is much more than the binary of cooperate or defect. But if you think about cooperate is like, I want to make your life better. And defect is like, I'm going to try to harm you. We have behavior that sends signals along that spectrum.
Yes. Yeah. It's brilliantly articulated. And the word that you and I used yesterday when we were discussing this that can be helpful in understanding non-complementary approaches is the reframe.
Yes.
Oh, there's Candace. Oh, thank you, Candace. Yeah. Is such a good correlation when talking about needing to express that we are not a threat in negotiations or de-escalation. Otherwise, you'll always likely get someone pushing back.
And your very physical presentation might itself be that, especially if someone has a script in which someone who looks like you played a role and they're reacting to that rather than being in the moment and seeing what actually could be, for sure.
Max, where could someone learn more about non-complementariness in the research sense or the academic sense?
The honest answer is that there are anecdotes that I've seen, and I'm sure more research exists. I'm not up on it. And it's like something I'm flirting with in terms of a PhD, because I think this is the coolest thing. And I also want to learn more about it. So I'm happy I don't know of one place. I think if you want to see, like, if you can find videos of police officers or other armed people disarming other armed people with just their words, it is something that needs to be seen as a possibility. Yes. And even if that's not the possible outcome in each situation, we have to do better. And it's really inspiring. So I do think it's part of like making the world a better place. So I would say experiment with it safely if you can. Try and do something unexpected.
And to put some summary, I'm sorry, please.
Oh, go for it.
I was going to say, and to describe, to put some clarity on it, the use of humor, the use of ingenuity, the use of novelty circuitry to apply the element of surprise, inspire someone to think differently with immediacy,
Yep.
And then move in that direction, from fighting to ice cream like this, from being angry to laughing and saying, whoa,
I think the goal is to like generate examples of this again in a safe and responsible way, because I think they come through anecdotes, and I have no shortage of them. There's a guy, Sam Artery, who I think that like is a very, very wise man, mediator. He gives an example that I hope you won't mind sharing, of something like when he's fighting, like I don't have the tools to respond to that right now. That's a very disarming thing to say when you expect that someone is going to rebut. When you expect that right, to just be like, I wish I had the ability to respond to that right now, and I wanted to.
God, that's so smart. Yes,
I syncopate the F out of this beat, like it drops quickly. But in terms of the verse, I've changed the tone entirely.
Yes,
and again, I think you're adding the language of like cadence, syncopation, and understanding the gestalt of the groove, which is just a fancy way of saying you understand the song. And we're not talking at a very technical level. You just get it. And so you can play with it in different ways where other people are like, hey, I'm still at a phase, which is totally okay, where I'm learning the notes.
God, I get so much smarter every time I talk to you.
I try to give that illusion. It's the Sicilian sparkle.
So good. Well, listen, brother, we've been at it for about 40 minutes here.
Oh,
how can people learn more about mindful negotiating, and what would you say distinguishes mindful negotiating in our sector?
I think so. Mindfulnegotiating.com. My name is Max Bevilacqua. You can reach out on LinkedIn, or my email is max@mindfulnegotiating.com. Love to chat with any of you, and Andy, big fan of your team from what I've seen so far, which reflects very well. And so I think I'm up to something similar, and we're up to something similar, which is, I don't know how different anything I have is, but it's in a specific tone that might be more helpful to some people. And at least what we're mindful is trying to get people who play the same song differently or speak the same language in different dialects, that you can identify with, that can be helpful to you in your context. So at Mindful, we're trying to break the cult of personality or the guru model of like, here's this one great person and their book, and then everyone who follows them, and being like, hey, we have different ways of saying things. We would rather you use a framework than my framework. Like, just do something.
Yeah. You're like the JKD guru of Jeet Kune Do guru, of our Kung Fu. Bruce was,
I didn't even know. I was so good at Kung Fu. This is awesome. Yeah.
Bruce was a devotee of everyone's art. He would immerse himself in it, take what he would like and leave the rest, and then encouraged his students to do same. And I love your worldview, Max, and I love our relationship, and I'm glad that it's evolving the way that it is. And I think there's lots for us to do together, bro.
There's so much. Keep doing what you're doing, man.
Thank you so much. For our audience, thank you so much for joining us on this live, where we know that there wasn't a lot of notice. We just announced it yesterday, but Max and I have this musical kick between us, and we like to do things impulsively because it feels good, and we will continue to do that. Thank you for joining us here at Jumpstart Mastery on our socials, and we look forward to talking to you again, Max. Take good care, and we'll see you next week on our All Socials Live on Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific.
Be well.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
More that you can lean into your own personal discomfort, say what needs to be said in a non-offensive way, the more you make the world a better place.